What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We are here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. This time for the playoff divisional round. 4-gamer, 2-gamers, showdown slates, you name it. We're going to cover it all in this video. Picks, strategies, everything you need for FanDuel and DraftKings. Welcome. I am Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, joined by Jack, owner of DFS Magic and creator of the lineup builder at Occupy Fantasy. Jack, unfortunately, we don't have any 5-figure or 6-figure screenshots this week for our viewers. I feel like it's a bit of a disappointment.
It is, but you hit back-to-back 15K wins, right? In some of the, was it Showdown?
Yeah, it's both showdown last week.
Yeah, and I had a small win on a two-gamer. Nothing like you said, nothing worthy of a screenshot. But we keep turning the crank. We keep using our strategies. They're working. I'm starting to get a little sad. I feel like we're gonna have this weekend and one more, and then obviously Super Bowl's fun, but that's it. So we have a lot of different slates to make the most of this week.
Yeah, exactly. So here's just a quick rundown of what we're going to do in this video. So the primary slate on DraftKings is their 4-game main, Saturday through Sunday. FanDuel, their biggest prizes are on the 2-game Saturday slate and the 2-game Sunday slate. So we're going to focus mostly on the DraftKings 4-gamer. We'll break down each of the FanDuel 2-gamers, and we'll hit team by team at the end, different angles and notes to help you build for whichever slate you're playing, and those notes will help you for the showdown slates as well. Now, our daily plug at OccupyFantasy.com, our written roadmap to the entire weekend, that'll be up later tonight. That will cover everything. It will cover 4-gamers, 2-gamers, and individualized notes for all the showdown slates. So if you want in-depth info for whatever slate you're playing, make sure you go check that out later today. Now, we are recording this early morning on Friday around 9 a.m. Eastern. So we don't have the Friday practice reports for the teams playing on Sunday. We don't have the full injury designations for the Saturday players, but we'll handle all the angles and we'll get down to it. So, Jack, let's start with the injuries for each team on the slate, and that can help us decide how we play some guys and how we stack some teams. So, if we start with Houston and Baltimore, Houston side, Noah Brown was placed on injured reserve. John Mechie ran more routes last week than Robert Woods. Xavier Hutchinson came in as the number 4 guy there. However, I will caution, and this was seemingly the case for many games last week, that there were a lot of blowouts. So I don't know if we can draw too many conclusions from route participation, snap counts of last week, because we do know teams like to condense playing time, maybe even change up playing time when their season is on the line. But with blowouts, it's kind of tough to say.
Yeah, and we talk about I think this is a similar strategy in the past. You mentioned how we have these same strategies that carry over from slate to slate to slate. Very common thing is a player is injured. Let's look at that's an opportunity. Let's look at which players could benefit, and then let's look at is the field going there at all? If they are, what are they doing? We obviously see we'll get into Mechie is looking to be pretty popular, so we'll talk about is that correct or not? Should we be taking a chance on other players that might benefit there, or should we just say this is uncertain?
Yeah, exactly, exactly, and we'll talk about that towards the end when we talk about angles for each team. For Baltimore side, now surprisingly, Mark Andrews, there were rumblings that he would potentially make it back for the playoffs. Then all of a sudden, his practice window was open. Then all of a sudden, he got in a full practice on Thursday. So most of the industry is projecting him to be in. Right now, our model and our ownership has him in as well. Jack, I would advise a word of caution. Just listening to Andrew's quotes on Thursday after practice, he said, "We have a great team. We have a great tight end room. If I'm not 100%, I'm not going to rush it back because I know those guys can get the job done. If I'm fully healthy, I will play." That to me, just 3 practices after that nasty injury, I don't know if he'll play, just given the vibes of those quotes. But fortunately, if we're just looking at the tight end position, it is pretty easy swapping one, our projections and ownership, but two, your exposure if we find out Andrews is out, because likely is roughly the same price on all of the slates.
Yeah, so I think we just you build with Andrews and be around it to make that swap. If he doesn't play, he'll probably still be 2% owned. Don't be one of those people. But yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward spot. Any other? You got Marlon Humphrey and Duvernay. I think is your other ones, right?
Yeah, so Marlon Humphrey is going to be out again. He hasn't practiced in 3 weeks basically with that calf injury. So certainly helps out Houston wide receivers if Baltimore's best cornerback is out. So if you're looking for low owned Nico Collins, who we will hit on here, I guess, before we get to these next games, we've already spent 5 minutes and we haven't gotten our best plays for the picks bros, the people who tune into the videos just for the picks. And they might have already left because we haven't said them in 5 minutes. So, Jack, before we get into the Green Bay and San Francisco and beyond injuries, let's give our favorite tournament plays at each position. And I've been hitting you and prompting you. Let's switch it up. Maybe you prompt me and I'll give you my favorite plays for the 4 game slate.
All right, so stay tuned, everyone, for the picks. Brian, quarterback on the 4-gamer.
I mean, we get both Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen at 15% or less, more than likely, on the 4 gamer. That is a no brainer to me. Those are the best tournament plays, hands down.
All right, running back.
So I think the Baltimore running backs, on the 2 gamers, they will be popular, but on the 4 gamers, they won't be because they elevated Dalvin Cook from the practice squad, signed him to the active roster, cut Melvin Gordon. They already said Dalvin's going to have a part of the game plan, but that could literally mean like one touch, right? He's still washed up. So we get Gus Edwards and Justice Hill both under 10%. And either one of those guys could have massive games. So I really like them in all contest formats, but especially the 4 gamer.
And that's a great point. Something for folks to look at. You can see the players that have the biggest difference in ownership from the 2-gamer to the 4-gamer is a great way to see, where to look for leverage on the 4-gamer.
Exactly.
Love that take. So, all right, we'll go wide receiver next.
So seemingly we've been on fire with some of our standout calls here the past couple of videos. We did not hit on Mike Evans last week. Obviously, he dropped a 50-yard touchdown, which certainly changed the entire dynamics of that game and obviously his fantasy box score. But he is the only underperforming wide receiver of the divisional round. And if you watch that game, that should not shock you that he is on that list. So he's under 20% owned on the 4-gamer. We will take that as well. And then Nico Collins. Yes, tough matchup against Baltimore, but without Marlon Humphrey. And Jack, I have literally never seen this in my 20 plus years of playing fantasy football. They rested Nico Collins in the final practice of the week in anticipation, and I quote, of his big workload against Baltimore. Like, how many times are they planning on throwing this guy the ball if they rest him in the final practice of the week?
It sets up great. They should be losing 16%. I mean, again, it's just people are trying to jam McCaffrey, and that's why you get these stud players with high workloads. And back to Mike Evans, if he doesn't drop that touchdown, he's not 12% owned
Right.
on the
Exactly.
slate.
Very
So,
easy.
For this purpose, let's be happy he did, and let's take advantage. All right, so tight end.
We did it last week. We're going to go back to Sam Laporta, who we have as 5% projected ownership on the 4-gamer on DraftKings. He is a little expensive. I understand it, the knee injury, but participation was there last week. Got the touchdown last week. Didn't put up the box score we needed him, especially when Jake Ferguson had about 100 DraftKings points. And if you didn't have him, you were dead. But we're going to go back to Laporta this week and probably, I would say, the most competitive game environment of the week in a dome. So I'll go back to Sam Laporta.
Love it. He did score, so not a total bust. And yeah, Jake Ferguson just blew the slate up. So all right, do you want to subject yourself to picking a defense, or should we pass on that?
I'm passing. I'm not doing that.
All right,
despite
good
the comments that we will get about which defense should I pick and so forth.
Which defense?
Yeah, come on, just
all right. So there's your picks for the picks bros. Now we can get into the real stuff, huh?
All right, let's go back to the injury reports here. Green Bay and San Francisco. Pulling up my notes here. Green Bay, Jair Alexander. Jack, as a Packers fan, you know he is perpetually questionable. But I think Matt LaFleur said he is hopefully able to go, and I imagine he will suit up in the divisional round. A.J. Dillon, his first limited practice in nearly 3 weeks with that thumb injury on Thursday. He is questionable. I'm not sure if he's going to play still, just one practice in that time span. And then on San Francisco's side, they're fully healthy, had the bye week. Dre Greenlaw is questionable, their linebacker, but we expect him to play. So the biggest thing, if Dillon is back, that puts a little bit of a dent in Aaron Jones' workload. But Jack, given how Aaron Jones has played, I'm not really sure that they're going to give A.J. Dillon the ball suddenly 10 plus times.
I mean, they were trying to not give him the ball when Aaron Jones was out. So with Aaron Jones in and playing well, yeah, I wouldn't worry about that one. Yeah, and Jair, I don't think it's going to affect the way anyone plays San Francisco pass catchers. So as a Packer fan, love that he's going to play, but yeah, I don't think it matters that much.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Tampa Bay. Again, now we're into the Sunday game, so we do not have Friday's practice reports. So just keep that in mind. We have to monitor their edge pass rusher, Shaq Barrett. He hasn't practiced the first two practices of the week. Chase Edmonds, the backup running back, may not seem like a big deal. On Showdown, it will be a big deal, but Edmonds has gotten a drive or two in each of the past few games. If he is out, I imagine Rashad White plays nearly 100% of the snaps. I'm not sure they trust Sean Tucker in any sort of role here in the playoffs. So that is definitely something to monitor. And then on Detroit side, Khalif Raymond still not practicing. 5 straight DMPs for him. I imagine he is out. So that's Josh Reynolds and Jamison Williams once again.
Yep, we that was one of our awesome calls last week. Reynolds, unfortunately, the field is not sleeping on him as much this week. But yep, he'll be back in the mix.
But still lower owned than Jamison, it seems like. I'm not sure if that's actually
Yeah,
going to be the case, right? But once again,
yeah. Unfortunately, we can't count Reynolds as one of our sub 10% low and leverage guys as much. So
right.
yeah.
All right, exactly. All right, final game of the week, Kansas City and Buffalo. A lot of impactful injuries here. And again, we'll have to monitor this after the final injury reports come out. Derek Nadi, the starting defensive tackle for Kansas City, 2 straight DMPs for him this week. We'll see if he gets into practice on Friday. Sky Moore, who has been on injured reserve, he is back. His window is open. A couple limited practices. Not sure he'll be back. If he is, I'm sure just a handful of plays. That is a showdown only play. On Buffalo's side, despite the win over Pittsburgh in the wild card round, their defense got decimated. So cornerback Christian Benford left early last week, hasn't practiced yet this week. Their top two inside linebackers, Terrell Bernard and Balin Spector, left last week's game. 2 straight DMPs this week. And then Gabe Davis dealing with that knee injury. He's in that Khalif Raymond mold where he has 5 straight DMPs. Even if he gets in a limited practice on Friday, we do not expect him to play. So Khalil Shakir backup as the wide receiver 2 for Buffalo more than likely. But Jack, the Buffalo defensive injuries are pretty impactful.
Yeah, I think that's the game I'm most looking forward to discussing with you. I just don't know what to make of it. There's just a lot, the quarterback ownership's pretty low. There's a lot of injuries. It's just it's not a traditional stud against stud 60-point shootout guaranteed kind of game, but the ownership is priced in there. It's not the chalkiest game. So there's probably some opportunities there that we'll get to.
Exactly. All right, so let's talk about the 4 gamer on DraftKings. And again, if you're playing the 4 gamer on FanDuel, there is a 4 gamer. Just the prize pools are lower. A lot of the concepts we talk about for this section will apply to the FanDuel 4 gamer as well. Just some different ownerships and salaries, so just keep that in mind as you're building. The lineup builder is your friend in these instances. So if we look at the 4 gamer, I have it up here on DraftKings, Jack. And we mentioned this last week a little bit when we talked about the 6 gamer. 4 gamer, a little bit smaller, obviously. That's why we're here. We're the experts to tell you that 4 games are less than 6 games. But when you look at strategies and we talk about short slates, the 3 angles we talk about, mega stacking a game. That means 4, 5, 6, 7 guys from one game. We talk about playing low owned plays, guys that are 15% or less, 10% or less. And then we talk about leaving salary on the table. Now, Jack, for a 4 gamer, I don't think you have to leave salary. But I do think mega stacking, given some of the games, and we haven't talked about the weather yet, and definitely the low owned plays because there are plenty on a 4 gamer. And seemingly, I mean, when we have not a random afternoon 4 gamer, we have an actual playoff 4 gamer. The low owned plays are actually good NFL players.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I agree for 4 gamer. Try to use up the salary and just really try to hammer some of these low end guys we'll get into. And yeah, I think the way I approach the overstacking is you maybe start with it if you're hand building. Start with a 3-man stack. If you're trying to click the last couple guys in and a guy makes sense and he's the fourth guy,
Yes.
don't block it because you're like, oh no, I can't play a 4-man stack. Definitely click it in. But you don't necessarily have to start your lineup saying like I have to play 4 guys from the same team.
Yeah, and I would say the best way to build something like that is at least including one running back or tight end, maybe both. Because once you get into the area of adding 2 wide receivers from the same team, on a 4 game slate, on a 2 gamer it's fine. 3 gamer is probably fine as well. But 4 gamer, now it's really an opportunity cost because you're missing out. Let's just say I'm just gonna pull up a lineup here, Jack, where you play. Let me see who has the best. Let's go with Detroit, right? So we play Goff, we play Amon Ra, we play Josh Reynolds, right? That's 2 receivers. We're now missing out on playing, and that's not even including running back with Mike Evans, right? We're missing out on Houston receivers, Baltimore receivers, Green Bay receivers, uh, all 4 of them. Ayuk, Debo Samuel, Rashi Rice, Stephon Diggs, Khalil Shakir. Like these are a lot of good players that we're missing out on. So really, if you are four-man stacking, you want to limit yourself to probably just one receiver from the same team, maybe two if that second guy is cheap.
Yeah, and fortunately, the tight ends are your friend, right, for
Yes.
stacking this week. Literally, I'm looking. Every single team has a actual tight end that
Yeah.
runs routes and catches the ball and doesn't need to fall in the end zone to score points. So I'm with you. I mean, I think you guys even, we point that out on the main sites for the plug. Like, if you're in doubt, just stack the tight end, right,
Yes.
for high risk. It seems like a great way to build this week.
Agree. So I think you start with quarterback, pass catcher, receiver, and tight end. If you want to add in a running back or another cheap player, you can as well. Running back with whatever player from the other team. Now, do you think it's possible to 4-2 stack on this slate? So four guys from one team, including the quarterback, two from the opposing team. Really, you need that game to shoot out. And I think as I ask you this, Jack, you look at Tampa Bay and Detroit being in a dome is super enticing. And then you look at San Francisco and Green Bay as, yes, a 10-point spread, but they have the higher totals of the week. I'm going to pull up the over-unders here. This is the Occupy Live odds. It is free on our site. And you look at the Houston-Baltimore total, 43.5. You look at Kansas City and Buffalo, 45.5, where the other two games are 49 and 50.5. So thoughts on mega stacking those two games, the higher total games on the four-gamer compared to the other ones?
Yeah, I mean, I'm never gonna say no. We've learned that one, but yeah, I think you just got to be careful about like the rest of your one-offs. Like, what kind of other game scripts will allow that lineup to win? Easy one would be San Francisco dominates Green Bay. McCaffrey gets all the points.
Yep.
Click him in. That's very viable. Maybe you say Kansas City Buffalo. They just beat each other up all game. It's not great weather. Maybe one of the running backs gets there, maybe a defense, right? So I think if you build like that, it might make sense. It's challenging. I probably wouldn't start there, but I guess I wouldn't block it for 150 lineups. Let's put it that way.
I think that is very fair, right? Very fair. You're hand building, and if you're using our lineup builder, you set the stacking option to min three from one side, min one from the other, but allow four and allow two opponents, and just see what happens because you might get some lineups near the top that you say, oh, this actually makes a lot of sense intuitively, right?
Yeah. Again, if it won, like, would you be shocked if a 4x2 Detroit Tampa Bay stack won? You wouldn't, right?
No.
So that's kind of why you play it.
Yeah, and to be honest, like we see 4-1 and 4-2 stacks even from some of the highest level pros in small field GPPs on like 10 and 11 game classic slates. So again, you don't have to be perfect here. You don't need the optimal on a four gamer, unlike the two gamers most of the time. So it does allow you to have a higher floor and more margin for error. So speaking of the weather, so Houston and Baltimore, Kansas City and Buffalo, low temperatures, sustained winds 10 to 15 miles per hour, gusts 20, maybe 30 in some spots in those games. Not like the games we saw last week. Not as cold as Kansas City, not as windy as Buffalo was. But either way, Jack, I don't know if it's going to be that big of an impact.
Yeah, probably not. You probably just play the guys. But I think you do bring up a good point though. The dome is clearly the spot to be in. Do you think? I'm trying to remember. Does Baltimore just play like slower pace? Is that a thing? I'm trying to figure out what metric I would look at for that.
Yeah,
Um,
plays per game. I don't know if they do or not. To be honest, I don't have it off the top of my head. But are you concerned just with the pace of that game?
I'm just wondering if it's windy and they're gonna say we're just gonna run the ball into oblivion. That's what I was thinking given the weather, but it's not enough for me to like not play the game at all. So I guess I'm not super concerned with the weather. I agree with you.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Let me see here. Favorite stack of the weekend on the four gamer, whether it's a game or a specific team.
I gotta go Detroit. I mean, I think Tampa Bay is quite bad on defense. I think last week was more just ineptitude by Philly. Hurts wasn't 100%. And like we always talk about, we know where the ball is going with Detroit. You said it. Start with a receiver, use a tight end. Those are also the two, featured pass catchers in that offense. So yeah, I think I'm going, and we have Mike Evans to run it back, underperforming wide receiver. So that's easily my favorite. I probably stole yours as well, but unless you have a different one.
No, I'm fully on board there, and maybe you play Baker as well, right? It could be a shootout. Any quarterback that you're not going to play. So now we get into four games. You have eight quarterbacks to choose from. Are you going to X out any of these players from your four game 150 lineup player pool?
I don't think you can.
Yeah,
It's tough,
right.
man. I mean, last week it was easy, but I mean, Stroud like has Collins, and he's 2% owned, and he's cheap, and Jordan Love is just on fire and should be losing the game. So
Right.
and he seems like a. I think that's an interesting one. We talked about Green Bay. It's difficult because they spread the ball, but the pass catchers are so cheap
Yeah.
that you can get away with because it's low owned. You can get away with like a 3-man very cheap Green Bay stack, and that lets you fit in, multiple studs that maybe other people can't fit in their lineup because they played a more expensive quarterback receiver combo. So that's why I'm still going there. If he was chalky, like I think even maybe on a 2-gamer, I might be slightly less interested, um, because all those pass catchers are getting ownership, and you really would have to hit. But I think for the 4-gamer, it makes a lot of sense.
No, I totally agree. That's a really good point about the low ownership and the salary and what it allows you to do with the rest of your lineup. Let me see. Anything else we want to hit on the 4-gamer before we move on to the 2-gamer for FanDuel?
Let's see. I think we always touch on backup running backs. I would say they're pretty gross
Yeah.
on this slate. I mean, with the exception of we're not counting Justice Hill as a backup, like he's a very featured guy, right? But
Yep.
like the true backup running backs, I think we've pointed out on a 2-gamer, with an injury, with some weird, massive salary difference between a starter and a backup, it can get there. But with so many guys in the 6K range that are featured running backs, I wouldn't go there. Any other low-owned 4-game receivers or chalky guys that you might want to take a stand on?
So you have the ownership pulled up on your end. I don't have it pulled up on my end. Who are the top projected owned running backs, receivers, tight ends? You guys 20,
Yeah.
25% or higher.
So running back will not surprise you, I don't think. McCaffrey around 50%, easily the highest projection on the slate by any site, so that makes sense. Rashad White, Evan Singletary, both around 30, and then Jones, Pacheco, James Cook, 20 mid 20s, Jameer Gibbs 20, and then we got a big gap, and we got Montgomery, Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, all in the sub 10.
Yeah, I mean, the Baltimore guys make so much sense. And Montgomery, right? And again, we talk about trusting the veterans in the playoffs. Montgomery's a guy that could have multiple touchdowns and be a slate winner.
He's gonna do it one of these games.
Yeah.
He's gonna just score 2 touchdowns and break everyone's hearts that played Gibbs or didn't play the running backs. But all right, so receiver is very interesting because people are paying up for McCaffrey. Top 5 highest owned receivers on the site. And granted, the receiver projections are a little flatter, but Josh Reynolds, Jamison Williams, Khalil Shakir,
It's so
Rasheed
bad, dude.
Rice, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yeah. So the top 4 guys, the top 3 guys are under 4K,
That's crazy.
ownership wise.
So we know how the field's going to build. It's very easily, right? So if you're building hand building, you know easily how to get away from that. If you're 150 maxing, you're naturally going to get away from that, assuming you put in some min exposure to some of these guys. But I mean, Jack, Debo, 35, 40 point upside. Mike Evans, 30 point upside. Nico has shown 30 point upside. Diggs without Gabe Davis, 30 point upside. Ayuk, 30 point upside. Right? It's crazy to miss out on that potential just to get McCaffrey into your lineup. And again, if you play cheaper other guys elsewhere, you can still fit McCaffrey plus one, maybe two of these guys.
Yeah, and I think this is a good way to think about like, how you select contests and stuff. Like you're playing small contests, sure, just play McCaffrey, play these cheap guys, make one smart pivot, right? But in the larger field stuff, even if you don't game stack, right, just having 2 stud receiver, like what if you just played, let's say you played, I don't know, a Houston stack, right, and then you played Mike Evans and Amon-Ra St. Brown as like a secondary game stack. Like
Yeah,
probably just like having those 2 guys in the same lineup will be pretty unique because they're both very expensive.
exactly. Exactly. I think so too. So, and again, if you're playing any other player that's not these guys or those values we mentioned, they're going to be super low owned. So even like Zay Flowers, all the Green Bay receivers, the Baltimore receivers. I mean, so many low owned options, and it wouldn't shock anyone if any one of those guys put up 15 plus points. So very easy to get different at receiver this week.
Yep. All right. I think we're good to move over.
Tight ends really quickly. Any?
Oh yeah. Oh, Laporta. I think I'm with you. I don't know that I'm trying to like take a stand here. I do really like the idea of just pairing with the quarterback
Agree.
no matter what. I mean, I think that's the best way to approach it.
Totally agree.
Um, Musgrave Craft. They're both pretty low. I think we saw Musgrave take over more, and really, he's the guy that's getting the down the field targets. So I think I prefer that if I'm going the Green Bay route. But both are fine. Um,
Agreed.
any other tight end thoughts?
No, I mean you nailed Musgrave last week. He didn't get the snaps we thought he would. Kraft still outsnapped him, but that's only going to continue to increase. And those snaps are more valuable for Musgrave, right? Like you said. So I think he'd be my preferred option there. So all right,
Oh
let's
yeah, I did call that one. I
yeah,
forgot.
yeah, don't forget about that. All right, let's go over the FanDuel two gamer. This is the Saturday two gamer, and again, this applies to the DraftKings one as well. Pricing and ownership will be different for the third straight time to remind people, but this is also a great time to reminder if you're not already, make sure you are subscribed to the channel, get notified when we go live, upload videos. This is the only video this weekend. We'll have another video next weekend. We'll have multiple videos for the Super Bowl, plus all the other sports that you can handle. Make sure you subscribe. Helps the channel. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers, so subscribing is a free way to help support the channel, but it is mutually beneficial because it lets you get notified, and the videos are recommended to you if you like them more frequently on YouTube when you're browsing. So, Jack, Houston, Baltimore, Green Bay, San Francisco. All of the short slate options are in play here. Mega stacking, low owned plays, leaving salary on the table, I believe. How are you approaching this two gamer?
Yeah, I think just what you said. I think all four. Let's just to contrast with previous two gamers. All four of these quarterbacks are absolutely in play, right?
Yes.
We're not debating if we don't want to play like a Danny DeVito type player. The running backs, we see this is about as concentrated as you're ever going to get with running backs, and we have three guys over 50% owned.
Crazy.
So I do think backup running backs are in play here. They're gross, but because these other guys are just way more expensive and so owned, like if one fails, it's conceivable that, and to your point about receivers, if I click over to receivers, even on this two gamer, we have Collins, Ayuk, Samuel, Flowers, the Green Bay guys, right? So if multiple of those guys go crazy and the running backs all kind of stagnate, you absolutely I think could see a bad backup running back that scores 5 points make the optimal. Yeah, I don't know. Anything I missed here?
I don't think so. If you look at a backup running back, so McCaffrey fully healed supposedly from that calf injury, right? Who knows? He could aggravate it. So Elijah Mitchell has to be the favored backup running back if you're playing mass multi-entry or playing large field contests. Not to mention 10-point favorites. Green Bay obviously has been great, but if San Francisco blows them out as teams off a bye in the playoffs are known to do, then Elijah could get some fourth quarter work. I know they hate resting McCaffrey, but maybe with a calf injury, they're a little bit smarter here. You look at Green Bay, they're splitting back up. That makes it tough. Baltimore is Justice Hill, Gus Edwards, but Dalvin Cook, while we think he's washed, maybe they have a bigger idea for him in mind and they play him more. So he's a great option in large field contests. And then Houston, you would need a Singletary injury since they do not trust Pierce at all right now. So I think Elijah is the easy two-game running back play if you're playing a low-owned guy.
Yeah, and to be clear, like if I'm playing these guys, I'm gonna try to use the salary up and like jam stud receivers, right? Because
Right.
that's you're not gonna win this lineup with Elijah Mitchell outscoring Aaron Jones. It's just very unlikely. You're gonna win because he scores 5, Aaron Jones scores 9, and some 8K receiver puts up 30, right? That's how
Yes,
these win. So
exactly. Let's see. Receivers, any other guys stand out? I mean, to me, Dontavian Wicks stands out the most. Obviously, Dobbs had the big game last week. Still, people still want to go to Reed. People are still looking at Watson, who outperformed Wicks last week. But Wicks still ran the second most routes. He's still talented. Let's not let a one-game sample cloud our judgment in a game where they blew out Dallas. Wicks is a guy that is extremely interesting to me.
yeah, and his role is definitely safe. I like it. None of the Packers receivers are super chalky. And I guess probably because people don't know who to play, and they're not going to stack Love heavily, so you just don't see. In fact, it's funny. They kind of add up to about 100%, right? So that makes sense. People are going to click in on
One.
average one Packer receiver to round a lineup out. I like that. Let's see. On the Houston side, I guess we should spend a moment on the other than Nico Collins. What do you do with the no Noah Brown? We have Robert Woods. We have Mechie, very chalky, especially on the two gamer. For whatever reason, sites have chosen to project him really high for his price. So yeah, how are you approaching that one?
Yeah, I don't get it, man. I mean, when Noah Brown Woods was out, when both were out, Mechie couldn't really draw a target. Yes, he ran the second most routes last week, but that could be blowout induced. Have to figure they trust Robert Woods more than him in a do or die game. I get it, but I would feel way comfortable either not playing him at all or being under the field no matter how many lineups you're making. I'd rather play Woods over him, or dude, I'd just rather play Baltimore receivers or Green Bay receivers at a little more price.
Yeah, especially on FanDuel where the pricing kind of gets muddled in the 5 to 6K range. I mean, if Mechie is 5K, it's not like he's 4,100 or something,
Right.
right? So you can play Dontavian Wicks is 57, Watson's 58. I mean, Baltimore got. Let me pull up Baltimore on
Bateman's
FanDuel
51.
here.
Bateman's 51.
Bateman's 51. Beckham's 56. Yeah, it's just a weird. People are guessing, right? As we said,
Yep.
and I probably will go zero Mechie. Honestly, I just like I don't see it. I mean, they gave a lot of run to Brevin Jordan too, right? So
Yep.
eh, it's just a weird and they rested Nico Collins. You think they're gonna throw Mechie 20 targets if they had to rest their wide receiver one?
Yeah.
Probably not. So I think that's the clear bad ownership on the Saturday slate. Any other ones? Let's see.
That's
We
definitely a
talked about
bad one.
receiver. Tight end, I think, is pretty flat. Yeah, I mean it's Andrews, Kittle, Schultz. The Packers guys are low. Even on a two gamer, they're sub 10. So
Yep.
that's another area I'd target is particularly. We'll just go back to the Musgrave well, right?
Yes.
See if he can get loose for a 50-yard gain. I mean, especially on a two gamer, right? Like if all the tight ends fail, maybe one big play is enough.
Would you play Brevin Jordan on the two gamer, knowing that?
I am gonna do it because of what we just said.
Yeah.
There's an injury. The field is going all in that Mechie is gonna fill that vacuum. We saw Brevin Jordan play even with Noah Brown on the field, so yeah, I will throw him into some two game, probably 5% or something like that.
Okay, sweet. So, let me think. So, our mega stacking low owned plays we've talked about, leaving salary. I think you can leave some salary, assuming you're playing real players here and not playing backups. Do you have a preference one way or the other, which game you're mega stacking, or are you just gonna load up on 4+ stacks from both games?
Saturday,
Yep.
I if I was building four lineups, I'd probably make one of each.
True. Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of like all of them. If I had to pick, I'd probably go Green Bay, San Francisco.
Okay.
What
I
about
like it.
you?
Yeah, I think so too. I think Purdy makes a lot of sense here. If you're building a small field, it's kind of tough to pinpoint Green Bay receivers, Baltimore receivers. Stroud against Baltimore's defense, yes, we know where the ball's going, but it makes it tougher. So I think Purdy is probably the safest bet. As a Packers fan, where's your hope level? 0 to 100. I feel like the hope is high after the Dallas victory, but now heading to San Francisco.
Really do I don't know. Maybe I give us one chance in five. Like I don't know, man. We're playing with house money. Like
True.
it was a very successful year. I wouldn't want to play us. That's for
No,
sure.
God no, absolutely
I'll
not.
say this: if they can get past San Francisco, I think they could win the Super Bowl.
Dude, I think so
But
too. Yeah, I think so.
I'm just McCaffrey's scary. But yeah, I think I'm interested in just watching Love and like I said, I think that game is interesting to stack. Just even on the two gamer playing Love, just allows you to get stud wide receivers in your lineup. Again, maybe more so on the four gamer, but um, would you consider like how many bringbacks would you consider on these teams? I think that's an interesting one. Like San Francisco, right? Like would you play like a 4x3 with that's kind of going to blow your whole cap? I guess that let's
Yeah.
just touch on that for a moment. How many bringbacks are you looking at? And then Baltimore, right? You have Lamar stealing touches. So I guess any unique aspects of the 4x1, 4x2, 4x3, 5x2 strategy for these teams?
It sounds weird, but I think really the only team you can five stack is probably Baltimore and Green Bay, honestly, because San Francisco is so concentrated and so expensive. Houston, there's really not much beyond Nico and Schultz and Singletary. So maybe if you ran back three Texans, I think you probably have to limit your run backs to two unless it's Baltimore or Green Bay. It sounds really crazy. So I think uh, 3+ players from one team outside the quarterback is probably reserved only for Baltimore and Green Bay.
Yeah, I'm with you. San Francisco is always a challenge for us on these short slates, right? They just don't quite fit the mold of the stackable teams. But we do have ways to do it. Jawan Jennings, the honorable mention, sub 10%. I mean, do you think he gets any run here? What kind of lineup would you include him in?
He's back, right? So I think you would include him in Purdy stacks as a cheap player, and maybe 4-man stacks, right? Use check me. I don't know, man. It's tough they are. I just put in Purdy, McCaffrey, Ayuk, Samuel. And that's 5K left per player, which you can make it work on this slate, but it's not something that's great. So it does really make it tough to mega stack a San Francisco lineup. So just know what you're going up against, because people who play Purdy are not going to play for San Francisco 49ers in their lineup.
Yep, exactly.
So, all right. That
Um,
anything else before we get on to the Sunday slate?
no, I think it's good. Yeah.
Okay, so on to the Sunday slate. We have Tampa Bay, Detroit, Kansas City, and Buffalo. And just a reminder, after this segment, we will just quickly run through each team as a reminder, maybe anything we missed on each team, how you can apply those angles to Showdown and or the larger slates as well. So Tampa Bay, Detroit, Kansas City, Buffalo, we talked about the Buccaneers Lions game being our preferred target. Again, mega stacking, low owned plays, and salary on the table, I think all apply to the slate as well.
Yeah. And this is the one I want to talk about, the other game. So yeah, I think we covered Detroit, Tampa. Like it's amazing. We know where the ball's going. Some guys are low owned. Um, Best game environment on the slate, right? So I think that one's pretty straightforward. You can stack it however you want. As many players as you know. Can you? I mean, can you five man Detroit? Probably.
I think so.
Let's see.
Because
You could
the
go
yeah.
Gibbs, Amon Ra, Porta, and then one of the punt receivers. Yeah, you could do it.
Yeah, I think so for sure. Because if you look at, I'm just doing this on FanDuel really quickly. That leaves you 5-man Detroit leaves you 5,800 per player. You can certainly make that work.
Yep. Tampa Bay side, we have
by the
Evans
way, that's on
and
DraftKings because you can only do 4 on FanDuel. So
yes. Tampa Bay side, I think you probably can as well. If you go Rashad White, Mike Evans, Otten, and then your maybe your David Moore play, I think that you wrote in your notes, right? He got more routes. Is that one of your calls this week, maybe on the two gamer?
it's so funny
Two games
because it's so funny.
special?
I did the Showdown video on Monday, and I said Trey Palmer was underperforming wide receiver. 50-yard touchdown. We'll take that. Someone in the comments asked about David Moore, and anytime, I tried to be extremely respectful of anyone who asked questions, but someone said Trey Palmer sucks. Play David Moore. So naturally, I replied back snarkily, David Moore, the guy who has like 1 catch per week over the past 8 weeks and runs like 8 routes per game. Anytime that ever happens, that player is a lock to score a touchdown. David Moore immediately scores a touchdown in that game. So I was reserved in saying anything else about David Moore now, but he did run more routes than Trey Palmer last week. But as well, it's hard to say, but he is more in play this week than than I gave him credit for last week.
Yeah, and it's not that we're trying to have a crystal ball and decide who's going to score. It's that on this two gamer, Trey Palmer is 20% owned, and David Moore is going to be like 2,
Right.
right? So maybe 5. So that's what we're saying is like there's an edge there that we have no idea which one of them will work. But is Trey Palmer 10 times more likely to score than David Moore? Like no, right?
No.
So that's the way to think about that ownership.
And just really
All
quickly,
right.
Jack. That's
Yeah.
just point number 100 in teams trusting veterans more than newer players and rookies in the playoffs. More veteran has played in the Super Bowl. Trey Palmer is a rookie this year. Teams will trust those guys no matter how snaps have shaken out in recent weeks.
Yep. Okay, so let's see. We touched. I think we're saying, clearly all these quarterbacks are in play for the Sunday two gamer. Um, let's just hit it. Buffalo, Kansas City. Are you looking to just play like field level game stacking? Are you trying to get over the field on this game? Like, what are your thoughts on this game?
So it's interesting, right? And I feel bad for Buffalo fans, not really, but they finally get home field advantage over the Chiefs. And then they're already down a bunch of players this entire season on defense. And now they potentially lose 3 more in the game before they play their rivals in Kansas City. That is bad news, right? So Kansas City and Mahomes Magic, I think, it's tough for them. It's tough to think that they beat Buffalo once again in the playoffs, but it looks likely with Buffalo missing the defenders. And as a result, with them missing defenders, it opens Kansas City up to more stacking. Opens up to play Kelsey, Pacheco, Rice, plus these other receivers. We called Hardman last week, and he did get a bump in routes run and opportunities, multiple downfield targets. He was the guy that used his Week 18 juice into playoff run. Again, guy that's been on the field with them in the Super Bowl. So Hardman's another great play, and I think you can 4-man stack Kansas City, and it makes sense.
Yeah, and we've I think this most often happens with Showdown where we say like, hey, if you're ever going to play Mahomes at captain, like do it now because for some reason on this slate he's only 20 like if he's playing against Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, right? He goes lower.
Right.
He's 22% on a two gamer.
Crazy.
I mean, just think about that, right? He's the third highest owned quarterback on it of four. And like you said, we have been granted the cheap downfield wide receiver to stack to round out our four man. That's been another problem with Kansas City, right? We've
Yes.
lost countless amounts of money. Well, I don't know, but we've poured money into bad 5% owned Kansas City receivers that never work. But now we have one that at least we can feel good about playing, right? We know he's going to get the opportunity. And you round out with Kelsey, with Rashee Rice, with Pacheco. I think that you could even five-man stack that, right?
Yes, absolutely. 100%. And Buffalo, you have the easy run backs and James Cook, Kincaid, Diggs, Shakir. It makes it super easy. And shout out to Ken, who's one of our staff, as he pointed out last week. In these high leverage games, Mahomes runs the ball more, scrambles more, so adds more potential to his fantasy ceiling. So, yeah, I think Mahomes has to be the favorite play here if he's going to be the third highest owned quarterback.
I back to your point about the four-gamer quarterback ownership. I remember reading a handicapper point out that in playoff games, quarterbacks run way more,
Yeah.
especially the ones that are capable of it. So getting Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and
Yes.
Mahomes at cheap ownership is, very, very good. And yeah, so I totally agree with what you're saying.
Agree. Okay. Buffalo side, obviously, I think you can four-man, five-man stack the variety of receivers outside of Diggs, multiple tight ends, running backs. Yeah, I mean it's the lower owned game. So yes, while we like Tampa Bay and Detroit, I mean how when you say you can get the ultimate matchup of Mahomes versus Allen at lower ownership, it's kind of crazy when you just boil it down to that singular point.
Yeah, Dawson Knox is still playing almost half the snaps. He did score. Now Kincaid went off, so it didn't matter that much for a two gamer because the tight end slot. I'm kind of interested in that, maybe as a punt in Showdown or two gamer, but in Showdown I'd be very interested in Dawson Knox. Probably coming in at significantly lower ownership, and I want to see what his price is. I wonder if he's kind of just expensive enough that people won't, click him in as like a $200 jam. But I'm gonna look.
That is ideal, right? Like when you get the tight end on DraftKings and FanDuel that is really cheap, and you're like, well, they're gonna be popular. I'd rather them be more expensive, and yes, less points per dollar projection, but no one's gonna play them as a result. It was like K. Dotton last week, right? He was 5,400 in Showdown. He was under 20% because that was a crazy price for him. But when he's that low owned, it doesn't, if he puts up the points, and it's a true differentiator.
Yeah, so I think this is good. So he's 3,400 at DraftKings. Like, and his projection's going to be bad. So like, I think that's expensive enough where he's sub 10%, maybe sub top 5%.
Yep.
Certainly, he's going to be not owned on FanDuel. So yeah, I think that's just an interesting one. Any interest in the dumpster diving on like Trent Sherfield or Deontay Hardy? Anyone like that?
Very interested on the two gamer and especially in Showdown. Without Gabe Davis, a little more two tight end sets. Shakir, the obvious number two receiver, but Sherfield, I think he almost ran 20 routes last week. Hardy, we saw him actually get back in the mix on offense where he was completely out of the rotation in the middle of the season after the early season run. So yeah, Sherfield's the guy for sure, but Hardy, big play threat, designed, manufactured touches, all are in play in Buffalo stacks.
Awesome. Okay. Any other thoughts on the two gamer?
No, I think that's it. I think you can mega stack both teams. There are low owned options. There are cheap options. You can save salary. Backup running backs, just quickly, if we're going that route and discussing it. Pacheco, you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That makes sense. Gibbs and Montgomery are 1A, 1B. Cook, Ty Johnson is interesting. Latavius Murray back with Leonard Fournette, not on the active roster, and even released off the practice squad. Rashad White, let's monitor Chase Edmonds. But this is definitely the better backup running back slate, Jack.
Yeah, these are some guys that catch passes, and just the price difference. I think one thing I look for too is like the price difference between the starter and the backup. Right, if it's only like 800, it's not as interesting. But a lot of these guys are 2 to 3K cheaper than
Yep.
the starter. That's where you can get those weird lineups where a guy. It's like I think you can talk about in Showdown, right? Like you can play a $200 player that scores zero, and it doesn't even matter because it allows you to jam studs, right? If you play a backup running back that scores 2 points, it's not about him. It's about the rest of your lineup.
Yeah, to that point,
Um,
just really quickly, I was looking at some other stuff, and
yeah.
you see pros do that a lot in Showdown cash lineups and small field GPPs, and Mach Levin won the 444 at Millie in the Kansas City Philadelphia Super Bowl last year with a zero in his lineup. That's a 750 player field. It's a $200 or $400 zero. So it really is what it allows you to do, but you need that game to shoot out for that to work. So just keep that in mind.
Which we have games that certainly could do that here.
Yep.
Okay, let's do the any chalky guys you are a little hesitant about or interested in taking a stand on. So running back, unsurprising, Rashad White, almost 70%, Cook 60, Checo 50, Gibbs 40, Montgomery 24, and then, everything else is basically zero.
I mean, I don't have a strong stand either way here. All these guys are great plays. I think maybe Cook is one I would be willing to be underweight on without the goal line touches, but that would be the only angle I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't like Rashad White from a watching football perspective because he's not just very inefficient. But yes, fantasy, you just got to eat it. He's getting so many opportunities.
Yep.
All right, wide receiver I think is the more interesting one on the last slate, probably here too. So top 5 highest owned: Rishi Rice, Godwin, Jameson Williams. There he is. St. Brown did get up here because there's no McCaffrey to compete for the salary. Diggs, Shakir checking in 30s, Mike Evans 29, Reynolds 25. Palmer 18, Hardman 16, and then pretty much zero.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough here, but Godwin's the guy I would be willing to be underweight on. I would just go heavy on Evans and under on Godwin. I don't even think Godwin would be this high if he had not scored that late touchdown last week. So give me Evans over Godwin. That would be the biggest stand. Yes, I know there's a $700 price difference on FanDuel, but for me that's the easy difference. Jack is still there. All right. While we're waiting for Jack to come back, final tight ends. Let's see here. Kelsey, Laporta, Kincaid, Otten. Again, this is another one where you just eat the ownership, I believe. So, all right, and then we'll go to Showdown notes finally. And if Jack does not come back, I will close out the show with Showdown notes. And just this is team by team. Let me bring up my notes here. These are teams that we're looking to get to low owned plays and or angles, and it'll just be team by team. These are notes, reminders from what we said earlier in the video. So Houston, Baltimore, we'll go game by game. Houston, remember, non-John Mechie wide receivers are guys we're looking at. For Baltimore, we like Justice Hill as a low-owned option. All the Baltimore running backs are going to be low-owned in Showdown. Baltimore receivers, it's kind of crazy to think that, but most Baltimore receivers outside of Zay Flowers are going to be low-owned in Beckham, in Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar. For Green Bay, Dontavian Wicks is the receiver we like the most. Secure role. Didn't do much last week. Should be lower owned. San Francisco, it's kind of tough. Maybe Juwan Jennings. They're fully healthy. The condensed target tree. It's really tough there. Kyle Juszczyk, maybe design plays in the playoffs. Tampa Bay and Detroit. Tampa Bay, Mike Evans, underperforming wide receiver. David Moore did run more routes than Trey Palmer last week, so we like him as a punt play, low-owned option. Josh Reynolds, once again, lower owned than Jameson Williams, despite outperforming him last week, despite being the veteran. So Josh Reynolds is the play once again for Detroit. Kansas City and Buffalo. Kansas City, Hardman, a legit role last week. Opportunities downfield. We like him as the cheaper option for Kansas City. And then on defense, the Bills' injuries really lead to opening up a lot of offensive potential for the Chiefs. Not that they needed any more potential. And in Buffalo, Sherfield, number 3 receiver, locked in now. And the Bills' backup running backs without Leonard Fournette. Latavius Murray, third down snaps, maybe some goal line. Ty Johnson, Spelling, James Cook. Lots of low-owned options there for Buffalo stacks and to get different in Showdown. So, long video. I know a lot that we covered here. If there's anything we missed, again, we recorded this early Friday morning, so drop a comment below. We will monitor the channel until the first game locks, but also throughout the weekend in case you have any other questions about Showdown or late swaps. So drop a comment below the video. Give us a thumbs up if you appreciate the content. That certainly helps out the channel, helps others find the video. Don't forget to subscribe. We're trying to get to 10K subscribers here very shortly. So you subscribing supports the channel for free and helps you get notified when we post any new videos. And our daily plug will be up Friday evening. That will cover all the 4 gamers, the 2 gamers, every single Showdown slate, a roadmap with rankings, lineup construction tips, strategies, slate notes for every slate on the weekend. Your full roadmap for the entire divisional round. So make sure you check that out, occupyfantasy.com. Link is in the description, and it'll be posted sometime Friday evening. So Brian, for Jack, who is no longer with us on this video, you see our names on screen where to follow us on Twitter at OccupyFantasy. Thank you for listening as always, and good luck and enjoy the divisional round of the NFL playoffs.